I followed Holmes' instructions to the letter, and before long we were traveling the European countryside. We backtracked and sidetracked several times to ensure that we would not be caught by Moriarty or his henchmen, and even then we had several close shaves. Holmes was sure that he had spotted the professor in the crowd just as our train left for Brussels. When we arrived that evening, Holmes telegraphed to London police and received almost an immediate reply.
I might have known. He's escaped.
Has escaped?
They have secured the whole gang with the exception of him. I think that you had better return to England, Watson.
Why?
Because your very life is in danger while you travel with me. This man's whole career is gone. Rather than return to London and be captured, I suspect he will now come after me and make good on his threats.
I'm not leaving you.
Watson,
Holmes, as a doctor and as your friend, I can hardly leave you while your life is at risk.
Very well. Get some rest, Watson. Tomorrow we leave for Switzerland.
Ah, the mountains. A good place to go unnoticed.
Yes, quite.
The following day we arrived in a small Swiss village called Meiringen. The scenery was lovely, but I could tell Holmes was uneasy. Even this out of the way of civilization. The innkeeper, a young woman who spoke excellent English, suggested we walk up the hills to see Rettenbach Falls. The view was spectacular, to say the least, but the falls themselves and the narrow paths around them were terrifying. The torrent, fed by the melting snow left over of the winter, plunged from a maddening height into a craggy abyss, hidden from view by the rising mist. And just as we were turning to head back to the village, a messenger came running up the path. Well, I wonder. Oh dear, an Englishman has just arrived at the inn. He's in urgent need of medical assistance, but refuses to see a Swiss doctor.
Well then, you had better go and help him.
But Holmes?
Don't worry, Watson. I shall follow you shortly. I wish to have one last look at the falls.
Well, all right.
I suspect our journey shall soon be over anyway, Watson. I shall be able to retire at the pinnacle of my career when this fiend is vanquished.
Well, until then.
Farewell, my friend.
And with that, I set off toward the village. Just before the path dropped out of sight from the falls, I glanced back over my shoulder and saw Holmes leaning against the rock, his arms folded and his gaze on the rest of the falls. It was the last time I would ever see him. Is he any better?
Beg your pardon?
Did you not send up a message? There's no injured Englishman up here?
Gracious, no. The only Englishman here apart from you and Mr. Holmes left about an hour ago.
Oh no! Holmes! But by the time I had arrived at the spot that I had left Holmes, nothing had remained but his overcoat draped over the rock he'd been leaning against. I shouted his name, only to hear the echo come back to me after the sound of the falls. Peering down into the spray, I saw nothing. I did, however, see two sets of footprints on the ridge just above me. There were no prints returning. Just as the full horror of the situation is setting on me, I saw a piece of folded paper in the pocket of Holmes' coat. I unfolded it and read.
My dear Watson, I write these lines to the courtesy of Professor Moriarty, who awaits my convenience at the final discussion of the questions that lie between us. He has begun telling me how he avoided the police, and I know now I was right to consider him my intellectual equal. I am pleased to think that I shall be able to remove him from society, though I fear at a cost which will cause pain to my friends, and especially, my dear Watson, to you. I have already explained to you, however, that even an outcome such as this is to be preferred. I suspected the message from the village was a hoax, but rather than have Moriarty destroy us both, I sent you away to spare your life. Give my thanks to the men involved in the gang's capture, and believe me to be, my dear friend, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.
Not much else remains to say. No bodies were ever found, for the swirling waters were too difficult to navigate. It is presumed both men were swept away in the rapids. The gang received their due sentences in court, and little was said about their chief in these proceedings. At last the world is free from his influence, if nothing else thanks to my friend, whom I shall ever regard as the best and the wisest man I have ever known.
The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, sponsored by Lion Brand Loafers, starring Jeremiah Boyd as Sherlock Holmes, Jonathan Peets as Dr. Watson. Jeremiah Boyd as Professor Moriarty. Additional voices by Liz Jenkins.
Music by Patrick Gowers.
Based on the story by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Adapted for the radio and directed by Liz Jenkins.